Can a night vision device feed you for 5 years? Let's find out. Today on our tech kitchen we have Sony A7S II. Let's go. What's good? My name is Oleg Nikitin. I'm a freelance videographer and a public speaking coach for 8 years now. And you're watching No Limits On and Tech Kitchen, the channel about the privilege of being a freelancer, tips and pieces of advice, about motivation, personal growth, some tech aspects and many more. Welcome to the channel. In the previous episode I've mentioned that every gear that we have is kind of a dish, and today we're having an exquisite Japanese dish, Sony A7S II. I've been working with it for more than 5 years and I've shot thousands of hours of footage. As soon as we compare the gear with dishes, let's find out the ingredients. The original batteries are still juicy enough to work with, but I use power bank with my camera to work properly. My piece of advice is to use original only batteries. I've chosen picture profile 8 and I've changed S-Log to Cine 4. For me, it's more comfortable to use ISO 200 as a minimal than ISO 1600 or 3200 as minimal when using S-Log. The dynamic range is pretty good in Cine 4 and I'm really happy with it. Also, I recommend using very fast memory cards, for example SanDisk, at least 95 MBs. All the links will be in the description below. The next thing is cooking time, and I consider this camera to have a mediocre learning curve. It's not too hard, but it's not really easy. In the end of the episode, I'll show you all of my settings. We all know that different food matches with different ingredients in different ways. And here is what I recommend. Lenses. Of course, it's an E-mount camera, so that is why I do recommend E-mount glass. For instance, I use 4 lenses on this camera. The first one is Carl Zeiss 35mm f2 lens, which is manual, and I'm shooting on it right now. The second one is Milvus, also from Carl Zeiss. It's a macro lens, and I often use it with my ingredient shots, macro shots. The third one is also Carl Zeiss lens, 85mm Batis. It has image stabilization and also it's a very fast lens and it has autofocus. And for my reportage shots, I often use 24-70 Sony Zeiss lens f4. Also, it has image stabilization and autofocus that helps me a lot when I'm shooting weddings, reception parties, concerts, and so on. Also, we do need to serve our dish, and the best serving for this camera, in my case, is a good tripod or monopod. Also, I often use my hands and to make handheld shots. For gimbal work, I do use another camera, which is Sony A6300, and we'll talk about that little baby in a few episodes later. So my using experience has been outstanding, and I couldn't wish more from that. The only time, actually there were 2 times, I had 2 overheating issues. The first one was when I was shooting for 2 hours in a very hot room in 4K 100 Mbps, and it was normal, I guess. And the second time was my karma, because I was shooting dance competition. It was in summer, around 30-35 degrees Celsius, and the direct sunlight was hitting the camera from the back. And there was a guy, another cameraman, and he went in front of my lens and started shooting just as close to the stage as possible. And I went to him, here's the video, and grabbed him, and we went away. And as soon as I came back, the camera overheated. That was instant karma. Respect your colleagues. So what are the main benefits in my opinion? First of all, it's incredible ISO. The highest I got was around 40,000 ISO and the picture was pretty good. If you want to use higher, please expose correctly. Your picture has to be exposed to the right, so it's gotta be brighter. The second benefit is 4K. The picture in 4K is outstanding, it's really crisp. I wish this camera had at least 50 or 60 FPS in 4K. 1080p is sharp and crisp as well. And the dynamic range in this camera is also pretty good. Let's talk a little bit about the negative aspects of this camera. The very first one is no 60 FPS in 4K. Of course we do need this, but in 2015 or 2016 when I bought this camera, we did not have this opportunity. Today things are changing. This camera uses 8-bit codecs only, and I wish it had 10 bits because the gradients and the bending when we shoot something like, I don't know, dark room with the only window and it falls apart. I wish it had 10 bits. Also, the picture in 1080 50 FPS is not really good. It's not as sharp as in 1080 25 frames per second or 24 frames per second. So it's usable, but it's a little soft to me. The original battery has not that much juice in it, so that is why I'm using a power bank almost all the time I'm shooting on A7S II. There is no second SD card slot, but come on, for that price in 2015, we couldn't wish for more. The screen at the back of the camera is not the sharpest and really not the brightest. Autofocus is not excellent at all, but it is there and it's usable, especially when there are faces in the frame. Internal image stabilization or IBIS is also pretty good. It's better to use it than not to use. And for me, it's also a benefit, more or less. It's not as good as Olympus now have, but it's still there and it's still usable. Especially when you use it together with image stabilized lenses. All of those negative aspects can be solved pretty easily. For instance, you can buy an external monitor or use power bank to solve those issues. All in all, I do recommend this camera in 2020 as a B camera or for A camera if you can find it in a good condition. Especially in 2020, there are a lot of those cameras on the market for a pretty reasonable price. I do recommend this camera based on my 5 years of experience. And this camera fed me for more than 5 years actually. And today's quote of the episode is a Russian folk wisdom. The one who has too clean instrument is a bad worker. And question of the episode: what experience do you have using A7S II? Okay guys, as I've promised, here is my list of settings for A7S II. And we start right here, the picture of a camera right here, and the second tab. Here we have our file format, XAVC HD for 1080p, and recording setting we can choose from 50p, 25p, 100 frames per second, 100 megabits per second, and 100 frames per second, 60 megabits per second. And if we choose right here 4K, we can choose from 25 or 100 megabits per second for 25p. If we use NTSC setting, we can choose from 24 frames per second, 30 frames per second, and also 120 frames per second in XAVC HD. So here is the next tab, nothing really important. You can pause the video to look at the settings I have. Next, also not really important. Here is the picture profile, picture effect and picture profile. Here is my picture profile, it's number 8. We press to the right and here we see that my black level is -1 and gamma changed to Cine 4. In stock version we have here S-Log2 or S-Log3. We simply change it to Cine 4 and here is my primary setting. So we go back to menu and we switch to the next one, focus magnifier, zoom, it's not really important. My piece of advice is to set to on smile and face detection because it helps a lot to autofocus. The next one is movie and high frame rate. Choose manual exposure here, this one, because in this case you can set manual exposure, manual iris and manual shutter speed. The next one is steady shot, it's always on. Also here we have audio recording levels, but we'll change them in function menu later on. And here is another tab. Here we do have our marquee display. Now it's off, but we can turn it on. And here I have my 235 frames. Also, here are my marker settings. We can turn it off and we'll have my thirds, as you can see. The next one is audio level display. It's not really important, also not really important. The next one, finder and monitor, I set to manual because sometimes it switches automatically and I don't really like it, and I have this switch down and I press this button and we switch from the viewfinder to our camera monitor. We go back to menu, zoom setting, clear image zoom. It's also important, set this to this function. Not really important, but you still can pause the video. And here's one of the most important things, function menu settings. Function menu is right here, and I do have several settings here. So first one is peaking, also focus mode, switch from autofocus to manual focus, but now I do have my manual lens on the camera, so that is why it's off. Then zebra, creative style, white balance, steady shot, it's always on. Picture profiles, I can switch my picture profiles right here. I do use PP8 Cine 4. Drive mode, audio recording levels, gamma assist display, I do not really use this one. Steady shot focal length, it's always on 35 or at 50. It depends if I use a 35mm manual lens or 50mm manual lens. And adjustment manual for steady shot. And here in this menu, function menu setting, you can see all the names and all the places of those functions. And right here you can see all of my custom key settings. So I've customized my camera to be the best and the easiest to reach for all of those buttons. So you can simply set it like this and it's really easy. And the last function is APS-C Super 35 mode. Now it's on, but in 4K it doesn't work, so that is why we switch back to our XAVC-S HD. I never use AVC HD and MP4 because the bit rates are really low. And then we go back to this tab and now we can switch to on, and the image will crop in a little bit and you'll see this sign. And when we switch this off, we go back to our full frame mode. And the next setting is our dial setups for iris and shutter speed. I always turn on the airplane mode to make the battery stay longer. And it's almost it. Also, we can go to this tab and you can see all of my settings right here. Nothing really important here. This was No Limits On, Techno Kitchen. See you later. Bye.